Alrighty. 42, I've broken this down. The biggest issue I see when people have worked on this and they're nearly done is at the end of line 2, when the hand melody changes, there's this big hesitation. So I'm just going to play lines 2 and 3. You want to work to keep going. And how do you do that? If you've worked line by line, how do you do that? It's best if you can start in the middle of the line. If I start in the middle of line 2, go slow, it sounds different. You want to feel that beat and try to keep that steady. So if you're doing this song, you want to work on that. I'm not going to take off if you hesitate a little bit, but you can't completely stop. Let's do the whole thing. It says slower at the end, so I slow down like a nice ending. Saints, 2 versions. We went over the first 2 lines a couple times. This will not become a quiz song. It's good to review the chords before you start, unless you totally know them. I'm not going to do that now because I've done that a few times. We're going to look at lines 3 and 4. If you're feeling behind, don't worry about this. It's good for you to hear it now, but don't worry about working it out. I think line 3 is the hardest. Because of the end, where it kind of shifts gears. So you're going to want to take it in small steps. Maybe just work that part out, maybe even smaller. Then make sure you can do the right hand and maybe start in the middle. And maybe just do that much. Get the right hand to be consistently going. And maybe just do the end. The idea is you link certain smaller parts together and keep working them out until it's like a muscle memory. Then put 2 of them together. Then put a bigger group together. So I'm not going to do much with this because this is really optional. Let's just do the last line. Once you can do line 2, you'll be able to do this. But one thing's different. In the left hand, the chord changes. So that might take some working out. 47 is the same song, but the hands are reversed. Let's listen to lines 3 going into 4. Same approach works here. I'll do some of that. Line 3. Do that a couple times, then add another measure. It's okay to go slow. Little by little, you work the parts. kind of overlap. Last line. So even if you feel like you're behind, you have a lot of work, do the first 2 lines, do them as best as you can. They don't have to be fast. You need to get this left, right, back and forth pattern going. Alrighty, bottom of 48, I'm going to lay my burden down. What they do here is they combine single notes plus chords, and you kind of hear the melody because the top note of the chords that's what we hear as the melody. That's the little unit. If that's hard, do it slower. If it's still hard, just do the chords. You do a little bit, repeat it. When it gets easier, do more. That repeats twice. Do that a couple times. Line 2, there's more changes. You'll have to work that. Once you get that, the very end is like part of the beginning. So it's good practice for your left hand. Next page, all chords, same chords in both hands. So the tip here, one of the tips is get both hands ready. Even when the right hand has a rest, have it ready. Shape both hands for C chord. Shape both hands for F chord. You want to think that way. So practice that unit. Go slower if you have to. Repeat it. Then do it twice. Your hands get used to thinking in terms of you see the chord and you shape for it even before you play. Next line. Do that a couple times. End is easy. So even though it's not like a real song, it's great practice with the chords. Now we are in the new G position. At the top, there's a chart. I went over this page at the end of the last class. Let's see, this is Tuesday? Oh my gosh, it's election day. I guess so Thursday, we went through this at the end. There's chart at the top, lines up a keyboard image with the paper notation. There's little lines. You can see the correspondence. There's a little, run through each hand in the middle. Bottom of the page is intervals. We had intervals with C position. It's kind of easy to do it mechanically. Once you kind of see the pattern, make sure you're kind of looking at the page. You can kind of go back and forth. Think about the pattern, look at the page. You want your brain to hook up how they correspond. You might just do a small section if it feels hard. That shouldn't be physically hard at this point, but you're going to try to think G, A, G, B. It's a step, then a skip, it's a second, then a third. Bottom of the page, harmonic. You might do the hands separately and really focus one at a time. So you want to do that as a warm-up, and then we get to some songs. They're simple songs, but they put into play the intervals, kind of in both hands, but they do it differently in both hands. So let's look at Love Somebody. I'm going to play you the whole song. Hopefully you hear the pattern. That happens 4 times. And then the second measure is kind of variations. So let's look at the first line, right hand. The first measure, that's a G chord. It's broken up. We can actually look at the first 3 notes as a broken chord. When it repeats, it's the same chord. But when we think of an arpeggio or a broken chord, if something repeats, it's part of the chord, but it's not really part of the arpeggio. Second measure, fourth measure, they're kind of opposites. Once you get right hand down, you look at left hand. Let's do first line, the 2 groups. Top note repeats. You might go real slow. The end of the line, it's like the opposite. And when you put this together, you could take a couple different approaches. You could just sort of play the line and see what happens, or go right to measure 2. That's treating measure 2 just like an exercise. It's all the song, but only a part of it. That doesn't sound like it makes sense. What I mean is it's all in the song. It's a part of the song, and it's like an exercise that exactly fits in there. If that's hard, instead of doing 3 beats, do 2. Mentally reset. Then add 1 more. Then go back a measure. Or slow. Or even slower. Get that down. Then jump to the end of the line. Do that the same way. You can do 2 groups, 3 groups. When that's good, put 2 measures together. Once that's good, there's a couple different ways you could proceed. You could just go to line 2, or you could try to put the whole line together. Sometimes when you put the whole line together, it feels a lot harder because you just focused on small parts, and your brain and your hands have not yet made that muscle memory that makes it easier. So you might just want, at the first day, just move on and do little sections. Line 2, same in the beginning. So you don't need to practice that. Go to the end. As you do this, make sure you're in the G position, and you're going to have to get used to that, how it looks on the piano. Your hands are not here. They're here. There's charts in the book. Pay attention to the groups of 3 black notes versus 2. Make sure you're in the right spot. And if it helps, pencil in some of these letter names. Okay, left hand at the end. That just repeats. maybe slow. So you work on the little units. The first time you practice, maybe that's all you do. You're looking for that, like that 80-20, like where is that point where your energy and your output gives you return versus when it gets harder. When it gets harder, move to something else. And then the next day, do the same thing. Start from the beginning and it gets easier. Bottom of the page. This is the bottom of 51. I'll play the whole thing for you. I want you to listen for something as I play it. Compare line 2 to line 1. Hopefully you've heard that there's a lot of similarity. It's the identical material, but it's switched. The end of the line's now the beginning. So let's look at what happens. Right hand, first 2 measures. There's a skip, step, step. Second part, steps. So focus on that. Let's go slow. Pair that up with thumb just keeps repeating. That's a little unit. Next unit. What if that's hard? Take a smaller section. That's a small section. Repeat it till it's easy. Little bit and repeat. When you do it that way, you can focus on less, so you can put more concentration on that, and you start hearing how the parts go together. Now make sure when you do this, the little bit of the phrase goes over 1 beat. This starts with an incomplete measure. It's 3 beats. That's 4, then 5. That's the first part of the phrase. It's kind of like a phrase that's comprised of 2 sub-phrases. And even though that's like 2 little tiny phrases, it makes kind of like 1 phrase. So the phrase ties over 1 beat. Left hand, complete the idea, even though it goes 1 beat over the bar line. Last line, same material, switched. Once you have the first line, last line is super easy. So in thinking of that 80-20, like you want to put your energy where it gets you the most return. If you're really busy, work out 1 line. Maybe try it the whole way through, but don't really work hard getting the whole thing through. You'll get most of the value from 1 line. Already we're doing great with time. Page 52. The chart's at the top to help you because this is new. There are little boxes where you can pencil in the notes. Use pencil. Ink is hard to fix. Now this is actually going to be easier than the previous page. What's just new and different and maybe feels hard is your hands are in a different position. You're starting to associate 3 finger with an E. Now it's not, it's a B. And keep in mind, a finger is not a note. You learn positions in the beginning and you make associations, but then you see the hand can really be anywhere. Not yet, it won't be anywhere, but ultimately, yes. First line. First part of the phrase, first half of the phrase, kind of goes up, and the second part kind of goes down. They're similar though. So work that out. Left hand does the same thing. Up with a little skip in there. So I'm just going to play them together. I'm going to play them a little faster. You don't need to get it fast. So that's for practice. There's some writing work. If you're new to reading music, you got to do this. Next page, the same. It goes over the intervals. There's writing work. If you're new, you want to work through these. If you don't understand something, then email me. Page 54. We have black notes. We have A sharp and C sharp. If you have your book in front of you, look at the top at the diagram. Focus on that pink box. To the right of the diagram, there's a very short little example. There's a rule about sharps. Sharps are in a category called accidentals. They change the note. There's three kinds. There's sharps, they go up. Flats, they go down. We won't get any flats this term. And there's naturals that cancel. We won't get those. That's next term. So if you have a sharp and a measure, every note after that, the sharp kind of turns on and the bar line cancels. So in that first example there's a sharp there, but the next one is sharp too because of that rule. Bar line cancels the sharp. We've got a B. The next C is not sharp. It's been canceled by the bar line. Then there's an A sharp. There's a second A sharp. Even if there was a note between them, the rule stands for the measure for that one note. So that's what we got there. So let's listen to the whole song. I call this money. I use shortcuts because I talk about these things thousands of times. Now, if you haven't done the Jingle Bells quiz, you don't want to really start this yet. Maybe take a little peek at the G position, put most of your energy in getting that done. And as I said, if you're stuck, if you contact me, show me how you're stuck, I'll help you. But you still want to be aware this is coming down the road. So when you budget your time, you're aware there's going to be new, different stuff. Let me grab my coffee. I don't like putting the coffee on the piano. And if you have a digital keyboard, don't let any liquids near. That spills inside. It gets on the circuit board, just like when you drop your phone in a lake. Not good. Alrighty, so let's break this down a little. I'm not going to go into depth, but in case you're ahead, just so you can get started, let's look at line 1. You would probably start with the melody maybe in 2 measure or 2-bar sections. When that gets easy, go to the next one. Do that a few times. Then check the left hand. It's just intervals. Alrighty, you evaluate it. Was it hard? Did it sound right? Did it not sound right? Did it feel super hard? If it feels hard, back off. Go to something simpler. You don't have to do the whole measure. When it's hard, you can do part. Then do it again. It starts to get easier. Alrighty, let's look a little bit at line 2. Okay, so if you're ahead, you can start working on this. And let me kind of mention something here too. Because everything's recorded, I can kind of move a little further ahead than the average person in the class is because everything's recorded. It's there for you. What I tended to do more in the live classes was, as I worked ahead, only working on small sections. So we were keeping a bunch of things going on, and we wouldn't do the whole songs right away. And we would circle back and do a line or 2 lines. So I do some of that now, but I also tend to finish the songs more sooner because it's all recorded. So you always can refer back. You've got the Zooms, you have the replays of the class. I don't think this gives you a great view of piano, but you have an overhead of every class. Then I send you individual song links. So when you're working on a song, you can go just to one song, link, and watch it, pause it, try it. When you need instruction, go to one of the class replays. So next page, 55, practice writing the sharp. If you're feeling behind, got lots of classes going on, don't worry about perfectly writing the sharp. If you're never going to do music again or piano again, don't even worry about it. It's important for you to recognize it, but if music's something you're going to work on, you do want to do this. If you can't do it, you want to follow the models. The act of using your hand and writing gets it into your brain. 56 and 57 we don't do. This is finger exercises. It's really an exercise that if you're a beginner, I don't think of this as a good thing to do. It involves holding all your fingers down and just doing one at a time. Outside of private lessons where you've got a teacher looking at your hand and working with you and making sure there's no strain, I don't think it's a good thing to do. If you've got time and if you're curious, read this and also be super careful not to strain your hand. If you try it, don't press too hard. These were really written a long time ago and for an acoustic piano. Digital pianos, the touch is really different. Even if you've got a really good digital with the 88 keys and the weighted and everything, it's still a little bit different. So don't worry about it. If you're curious, just go easy. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go up to, probably here. All right, so we're still doing great with time. Page 58. Once again, this is like an initial survey. I'm not breaking it down completely, but just if you're ahead, you can go ahead. New chord position of the G. We learned it like this. I know you can't really see well, but you know how you learn the G. Your thumb's on a G, now your pinky's going to be on the G. This is root position. In your home page, one of those sections in the middle is called chord charts. I made a separate chart for every chord where there's a graph of the keyboard. I made like a little graph and I put little dots. You can do that, but there's one that has all the chords. So it's a PDF. You can just, save that on your computer and pop it open when you want to check any chord that we do. So its root position, it feels like a C because C was root position. So here we go. We now have an F sharp in the D7 chord. The pink box to the right is D7. It shares a lot of characteristics with the G7 chord. The shape is similar. Your 1 and your 2 fingers are together on 2 adjacent white notes, but your pinky is on a black note. What I do is I don't twist my hand, I just move my hand back into the keys. With some digital keyboards, I guess you can see my hands, this distance is shorter. The black keys aren't quite so long, but watch where my hand is. Even if you can't see the notes, you can see I move back or in, depending on how you use that word. But if you're working on Jingle Bells, don't worry about this yet. But be aware, it's coming down the pipeline. This is just practice of the chords. I'm going to play you page 59. This uses the chords. The first line has a repeat at the end. That's a crucial repeat. Unlike the repeat signs they slap at the end of so many lines, just, if it's an exercise so that you work on it, or just to teach you the sign, this is a crucial repeat. It's part of the song. Page 60, the right-hand version of what we just looked at. The right-hand D7 chord is going to feel more challenging because your thumb is shorter, but it has to get back to a black note, and the black notes are further back. So look where my hand is. Look where my wrist is. I move even more for this one because my short thumb has to get back to that F sharp, and I don't twist. You're not going to really see that from that angle, but you will with this angle. That's not as good. Now, if you're a guy with really large hands and big fingers, if you get back in here with the black notes, and if you press one note and 2 go down, because your fingers are just wide enough there that they hit. I can't really do it. I'm sort of faking it here by turning my hand a little bit. But if that's the case for you, there is a workaround. You're not going to really see that well here. But over the years, working with a lot of guys, 6'4" and everything, big hands, I just saw people do this that worked. I was kind of aware of it because when you go further in piano, you play full D7 chords. And your 2's already there. But as a beginner, for some, that's going to feel harder. But if you have big fingers, it might be easier for you. So don't worry about that now. Watch the overhead. You'll see it. And let me just see. This is the last thing I'm going to do. I was just kind of checking where I ended yesterday. The damper pedal is introduced here. It's the 3 pedals on the floor. Sometimes they call it the gas pedal. It's on the right. And I don't really teach that in these classes for the reason that actually using it properly is a one-on-one thing. It's more of a refined, nuanced thing. However, the basics, you just slap that pedal down. Not really slap it, you know what I mean. They introduce it here. Many of you don't even have this. If you have a pedal, sustain pedal, Damper pedal, same thing, sometimes just called pedal. The reason there's another word there, a modifier, is because there's other pedals you could conceivably have, depending on your keyboard. So on this page, they have you put it down for a whole line. At the end, there's actually a change in the middle. When one chord is repeating with nothing else, you can keep it down. So that part is kind of easy to pick up. When the chord changes, you have to change the pedal. However, how you do that is a very personal thing. I've worked with some advanced students where we work on that for a year, getting that exact nuance. So that's not something I teach in a class because it really can't be, because I'd have to be sitting next to you, seeing your foot. You would need a piano or a digital with that kind of a pedal. So if you've got one and want to try it, go ahead. There's sort of a, if you follow this notation, at the end of each line, you're going to kind of hear a gap. So if you hear that, that's because this is only part of the picture. So let me play the whole song. I'm not going to use pedal because that's not something we're going to be focusing on. So we've got these new chords, and we're just going to use them. Shape your hands for the G, then you'll shape it for the D7. Sorry about that. Somehow I slipped. With the pedal, it sounds cool. It sounds smoother. And that's part of that piano sound that people hear and really love. If you follow this pedaling, though, you're going to hear that gap. Did you hear that? Did you hear when I lifted the pedal like this marking? So how we bridge that, that's more of a private lesson thing. So let me just